Can I ask a question?
I'm sorry, I thought it was our personal discussion.
I know I'm in the back of the room. So. It's been a while, and I'm a little foggy, but I still remember the Park District strategic vision. Sell off one park, develop that, reinvest those funds, redevelop the park, walkways over Ogden, a lot of things that I think a lot of people in my District 4, maybe District 1 or 2 north there of the tracks like, because we are landlocked with parks, we have to cross busy streets, things like that are attracted to us. I guess I don't know if it's a fair question to you, but can you speak to what is the strategic vision for the Friends of the Park? What would they like to see of the park that would help us? That's what I'd like to hear from the Friends of the Park District. There are Friends of Gordon Park, excuse me. How can they basically make their offer attractive to people like me who like the fact of what the Park District is offering us with the walkways and the development in there?
All right. Do you believe the Park District is offering you a walkway over Ogden Avenue?
Like I said, it's been a while, but I believe that was one of the things that was being offered.
It would be very interesting, I think, and I have a recording of it, for you to see the May Park District meeting. And what you would hear there, for one thing, about that walkway, is neither the Park District, the developer, or the Village of LaGrange had any money for it. They did not. There was a lot of going like this as to who was supposed to do that.
I guess.
So it's not on the table.
What is the Friends of Gordon Park strategic vision for the park? How would they improve it? Or, I guess.
I think that the part of the philosophy goes like this: parks aren't just sports authorities. Okay? Gordon Park would literally become virtually a sports authority. I know that they talk about a butterfly park and a splash park, but that would be small portions of it. And I know if you go over Sedgwick Park now, and you want to use one of those ball fields, they're locked. They're intended at this point only for the use of Little League. They're not public. And they were talking about these facilities over there that really wouldn't be public. So it's an issue of philosophy. What is this vision? The vision is the park should have something other than just sports. And people talk about, well, this land may not be useful. And the question is, what do you mean by useful? If the only use is to put a sports field on it, then some of it probably isn't useful. On the other hand, can you play tag there? Yeah. Can you have a picnic there? Certainly. Would you rather have a picnic under the trees or out in the field? And I guess when it comes to useful, again, get an idea of the size of this park. This is a picture of the area, only the area that's being sold. This picture, except for this parking lot, is only the area being sold. And by the way, had a soccer field on it for much of the time and available. So it was sports area.
So the question is the Friends of Gordon Park, is their strategic vision just to leave the park as is and don't ever touch it?
No, but their vision is not to sell any of the land because we have so little. You can do things with it, certainly. I mean, you should, to some degree. I mean, I think it's also, if you go to Denning Park, large portions of Denning Park aren't developable, which is nice. Although I will tell you that if you go and you look again at the minutes of the Park District, they have a program to develop Denning Park much the same as Gordon Park. They've actually looked for grants on that line. So again, it's a philosophy. I believe that this board seems to have the philosophy that they're a sports authority as opposed to a park district. Sports should be part of it, there's no question. But it shouldn't be all of it.
I'm listening, and I haven't followed this because I don't have kids and I don't use the parks like some people do. I think we get to the emotional part, which is what I'm hearing. I think it goes back to what he said in the beginning. Basic question is, did the park do something improper or not follow the steps to give them the permission to sell it? All these other issues are side issues. And why, regardless of 45% or 55% of the vote, why should they be allowed? And I'm not taking sides. I'm just saying, I as a citizen would say, why should they be allowed to do something that's not proper? And that's what I think is the fundamental question. Answer that, and then you could bring in all the other emotion. If they can be proved to have not done something that's proper, Why, just because you like the idea of having walkways or development there, why should they be allowed to do it? And that's what I think the only issue the court's supposed to decide, not whether it's good, bad, things are green or not green, or I like it or I don't like it. It's did they follow the proper procedures to put themselves in a position to sell it? Am I hearing something wrong? You know, the other things are emotional issues or likes and dislikes. It's got nothing to do with whether they did the right thing.
That doesn't seem to be what the court's being asked to decide.
Am
The
I
court's
wrong?
being asked to decide, according to Tom, whether or not it's in the public interest. It's got nothing to do with that, whether anybody did right, wrong, or indifferent.
And it turns out you're both right. When it came to the question of the statute that would, for which the
Well, they got them over the 3 acres.
right, when it comes to that point, yes, that was a technical issue. When it comes to the referendum, and I wouldn't say technical issue, I mean it's jurisdiction, but when it comes to the referendum, the question was whether or not they followed the law in actually holding that auction, and the court found that it did. There are other arguments there. And,
The court that thought they did.
but you're also right, because the way this statute is written on the case that is now pending, it is the circuit court that determines whether or not it's in the public interest to sell the property. And so at that point, yes, I mean, the court is going to decide that issue. But what the court has to decide first is whether or not the property should be sold. And we have a tradition, or a policy, actually, a state policy, that is seen in its statutes, that said we shouldn't sell this property unless it's really in the public interest. And the things that the Park District puts forward as to why they should sell the property are different than what the reasons of the public about how that money would get used. And I guess I point this out. If it's only about the money, what you're going to do with the money, then you would find that almost any park should be sold. If I think about the money you could get for Grant Park, you could get huge amounts of money for it. You could probably balance Chicago's budget with that money. Should you sell it? Probably not.
Well, now you're
That's
offering
the
argument,
issue.
Tom.
So it's not
respectfully.
just about the
Now
money.
you're offering argument. You're not answering questions.
Well, my point is, you asked about
Save it.
I know. You asked about the.
I didn't ask about
Somebody asked
anything.
here about this issue about what's good or what the court is deciding and what's not. And I guess my point is this. What the Park District is going to do with the money is irrelevant. The only issue is whether or not the Park District should be allowed to sell this parkland. What they're going to do with it is irrelevant. We are going to assume that if the Park District gets money, it's going to spend it, hopefully, in a proper way that is in the public interest. Some of that money, by their own admission, at least $1 million, according to their treasurer, is simply going to go right back in to their reserves. It's not going to be spent on Grange Park. Yes.
I understand the question, or why litigation is ongoing, based on what you just discussed. But has there ever been any discussion from the Friends of the Park, or an offer of compromise in the sense that if the Park District buys somewhere, I mean, with like say foreclosures and everything else going on in Grange, buying houses up or something that could possibly be used as parkland, I mean, maybe that's a little.
Well, first, I don't know that you
exchange.
could possibly get that much,
Yeah.
but the Park District I get myself sideways. Settlement negotiations are not admissible in court. I want everybody to understand that. So, while they're not secret, they're not admissible in court, and they're not admissible for good reason. That is, that they would stymie people from having those negotiations. All right. That being said, like I said, they're not secret, and I think the Park District has actually published some of their offers to settle. The most that I recall the Park District offered to put aside for purchasing new land was $50,000. We actually had a proposal for a lot more money than that was summarily turned down. And there's the thing, it's again, the developer would be
negotiations
willing to do this deal with this parcel, at least from what he told me. All right. I mean, it was a private conversation, and he might not be willing to let me hold him to it at this point. But he told me that if he had this parcel, he didn't need the road, and he didn't need this parcel up here, and he didn't really want them. He said the economy had changed, that it was always a little bit marginal for those parcels anyway, and that if he had his preferences, he wouldn't want that. Now, I think the developer still stays in this deal because he's had a lot of something costs for him, it's a loss.
Are the negotiations ongoing?
No, and the reason they're not is that basically the Park District's position, as far as we read it, because our understanding of it, is they effectively want it all, at least not right now. So they would agree to this parcel on the road, but they're going to say that, yeah, but we won't sell this until this development is done. No one can sell this. So they're not really offering us very much.
I guess my question is, you're saying it's a procedural issue, and aren't you concerned in some way that it could be a Pyrrhic victory in the end? You won the procedural, and then it would still. The other question I have is, would it be something that a judge would rely on to determine the public interest, the fact that the referendum actually passed?
No. The referendum in the current litigation is irrelevant, and it wouldn't be admissible.
So the judge couldn't say, well, public interest includes what people thought about it, and
Well,
therefore I should consider that as one of many things that I'm looking at. And I'm saying this as a person who voted against the referendum, but once I lost, I moved on in my mind.
Right.
And so I can see both sides to this whole issue.
The referendum was part of a statutory procedure. The Park District has lost on that procedure at this point. It's on appeal, but they lost on that procedure. Okay? The referendum is only relevant to that statutory procedure. The current litigation, and I'll tell you that's not technical, that's going to a trial on the facts. The current litigation does not involve a referendum. And you have to look at this from evidence in a courtroom, all right? My opinion as to whether or not this should happen is completely inadmissible. Just inadmissible, can't come in. I don't think that anybody's opinion as to what is in the public interest could come in because literally it would be exactly that, their personal opinion. It would basically be a ray for our side. I want this to happen, so it should happen. And you could see what would happen if a court allowed those opinions. The Park District would line up a bunch of people, and I'd line up a bunch of people, and the court would be going on for years listening to everybody's opinion. The referendum is nothing but a gigantic opinion. And it's also, if it were to come into this case, it's an opinion that can be attacked. Because things were promised in that referendum, you see, not by the Park District so much as by, I don't want to say ARP, there was a group that ARP funded. Things were promised there, but turned out to not be true.